Sagittarius in the Bible, the most misunderstood sign with a divine purpose. There are people who never quite feel like they belong to one fixed place. They always look further, dream deeper, and carry within themselves a longing they cannot even name. If you've ever felt as though life is a sacred journey, not just a series of passing days, then perhaps you carry the spirit of Sagittarius within you. And today, we are going to explore that. Not through cards or vague predictions, but through the powerful metaphors found in the Bible, where ancient light shines upon souls that have been chosen. You are about to step into a 30-minute journey. But this is not a dry lecture. It is a reminder. A doorway leading you back to the deepest part of yourself. Together, we'll unravel why Sagittarius, often misunderstood, often labeled as vague or unpredictable, is actually a soul that carries one of the deepest spiritual meanings. If your heart feels something quietly knocking from within, leave a comment. I was born to walk a sacred path. That statement is not just an affirmation. It is a thread connecting you to the silent energy that has been guiding you toward your true destiny. And if you feel that these words speak to you, don't forget to like and share this video. Because somewhere out there, another Sagittarian soul may be waiting to be awakened. Be ready. Because right now, we're going to unveil the truth about a sign that is wild, powerful, and holier than the world has ever imagined. Sagittarius, the most misunderstood sign, yet one with a divine purpose written long ago. There's something very few people are willing to admit. That sometimes, the restlessness in your soul, the feeling that you can never sit still in one place, that you can never stop searching for something greater, is actually the clearest sign that you're living in alignment with your truest self. People often say that Sagittarius is the one who can't stop moving, who always lives with one foot in the present and one foot in the distant horizon. But perhaps they've forgotten that not everyone was born to build houses. Some souls were created to build roads. And if you are a Sagittarius, or if there is a part of that spirit living inside of you, then perhaps you are one of those people. Born not to stay, but to go. To lead. To open doors for those still trapped within invisible boundaries. I believe that in a world filled with chaos and conformity, those who live like Sagittarius are not outcasts. They are reminders that the world still has space for hope. They carry within them the sense that something more beautiful lies ahead. Even if it hasn't yet taken shape, even if no map points the way. And strangely enough, those people are often the most misunderstood. Because they are not predictable. They don't live by the pace of the crowd. They don't seek safety. They seek meaning. In today's society, where control is glorified, Sagittarius is like a poem without rhyme. Difficult to understand, but painfully honest. From a faith-based perspective, I see in Sagittarius the reflection of those in the Bible who gave up everything to follow the call of God. Think of Abraham, who left his homeland without knowing where he was going, simply because he believed that something greater awaited him at the end of the road. Or Moses, who left behind a royal life to lead his people through the desert, simply because he heard a calling from the Invisible One. They didn't know what would happen next. They only knew that if they didn't take that step, the most sacred part of their lives would never come to be. Sagittarius is like that. They are souls born with an inner compass. One that doesn't just point toward success, but toward truth, toward light, toward their true selves. And if you've ever felt the constant need to move, to change, to question, please don't mistake that for instability. Don't let those who don't understand you make you believe you are wrong. Maybe you are not wrong at all. Maybe you're simply walking the right path. The path that no one else dares to take. One of the things I admire most about Sagittarius is their courage to keep going. While many choose safety, Sagittarius chooses to stay true to themselves. And sometimes, that makes them feel isolated. They become the ones no one quite understands. But you know what? In this world, the real danger isn't being misunderstood. It's living a life that isn't true. And Sagittarius is one of the rare souls brave enough to live truthfully, even when the price is loneliness. And here is the great lesson we can learn from them. That true freedom doesn't come from following others. It comes from being loyal to the deepest voice within. That's also why, in the Bible, those chosen to change history were always the ones who didn't quite fit the mold. From shepherds to fishermen to those rejected by society. God didn't choose the perfect. He chose the brave. So if you're listening to this today, and you feel you belong to something greater, even if you don't yet know how to explain it, I want you to remember this. You don't need all the answers. You just need enough faith to take the next step. Because maybe you are the bridge that future generations will cross. Maybe you are the one clearing a path through the wilderness, so others can find their way to the light. And if your heart is nodding quietly in agreement, leave a comment. I am a pathfinder, and I trust my journey. Write it as an affirmation. A way of taking one more sacred step toward the destiny that was chosen for you long before you were born. Souls like Sagittarius don't live to be praised. They live to lead. They live to prove that faith can carry a person beyond any barrier. And if someone has ever called you a dreamer, smile. Because maybe you, with your endlessly seeking heart, are carrying a piece of a divine plan the world has yet to understand. And this is only the beginning. Because there's something else, something deeply important that few people realize. Sagittarius is not just a wanderer in search of the way. They are a messenger. A bearer of fire. Someone entrusted to speak what others haven't yet found the courage to say. In the next part, we'll explore a sacred gift that God placed within Sagittarius, the power to speak, to connect, to inspire, and to change the world with nothing more than their words. Are you ready? Because that, right there, is the true fire Sagittarius has carried in their heart since the beginning. One of the things few people say about Sagittarius is this. They are not just seekers of the path. They are carriers of the message. They don't wander aimlessly. They listen. They observe. And when the moment is right, they speak. Not to argue, but to awaken. To illuminate. To open up a new horizon for the souls that have fallen asleep in the repetition of everyday life. I once met a Sagittarian man, a quiet man. Someone who viewed life through thoughtful eyes. He wasn't the type to argue. But once, in the middle of a tense family gathering, he said just one sentence. And the whole room went silent. Because his words, though gentle, cut straight to the truth everyone else had been avoiding. And then something strange happened. No one got angry. No one objected. They just sat there, silent, and began to change. When I asked him why he chose that exact moment to speak, he simply smiled and said, I didn't speak for myself. I spoke because my heart knew it was time someone said it. I've thought about that moment often. And I've come to understand. Sagittarians don't speak to impress. They speak because they were born with a fire inside. A fire that can't be extinguished, only passed on. When they speak, it's not because they need to be heard. It's because their soul refuses to stay silent when the truth is being ignored. In the Bible, I see that same spirit in the prophets. Like Isaiah. Like Jeremiah. Like John the Baptist. People who didn't say what was convenient, but what was necessary. They spoke in the wilderness. They cried out in the face of indifference. And though no one believed them at first, it was their words that eventually led people back to God. Sagittarius, in many ways, is a living echo of that same spirit. A sacred messenger, knocking at the door in unexpected moments, reminding the world that truth never dies. It only waits for a brave soul to speak on its behalf. But with that gift comes no small challenge. Because the world isn't always ready to hear the truth. And that's why Sagittarius often has to learn how to balance courage with wisdom. They must learn to use words as light, not as weapons. They must understand that while truth can be sharp, only when it is spoken with compassion can it truly reach another's heart. I've learned something deeply personal from this. Words are not meant to win arguments. Words are meant to awaken the best within us. And Sagittarius, when they step into their highest self, holds the rare ability to do that. To help people remember why they once believed in goodness, in justice, in something sacred. If you are a Sagittarius, and you've ever been called too blunt, too impulsive, or too much, pause for a moment and ask yourself, could it be that you're simply speaking what no one else dares to say? Could it be that you're carrying a part of a mission you were never trained for, yet always knew was yours? If that's true, then don't let fear make you silent. But also, don't let anger make you shout. Let your words become a shelter, not a sword. Let the voice inside you be shaped by gentleness. Because then, you're not just a messenger. You become a healer. And if you've ever felt like you talked too much, too fast, or said the wrong thing at the wrong time, let me tell you this. Don't fear failure. Because maybe you've never been wrong. Maybe you're simply learning how to speak right. Every mistake, every time you were misunderstood, has been a lesson guiding you toward the way God wants you to carry the light. Because in the end, truth does not need perfection to be shared. It only needs someone willing. And if you're listening to this and something is rising inside you, a feeling that says, yes, this is me, then write it down in the comments. I was born to speak what needs to be said. Don't hold back. That statement isn't just a declaration. It's a confirmation. A sacred commitment between you and your soul. That you will no longer deny the divine calling you've carried since birth. I believe that if this world had more people willing to speak with love, with kindness, with truth, then our society would be healthier, our children safer, and our communities would heal more quickly. And I believe Sagittarius is part of that process. Not because they are perfect, but because they are real. And this world doesn't need more correctness. It needs more realness. And that brings us to the next part. Because words, no matter how powerful, are only the surface of a deeper truth. The truth that Sagittarius doesn't just walk and speak. They see. They feel. They know. Long before others even begin to sense what's coming. Because deep within their soul lies a sacred compass of intuition. A gift few recognize. But when nurtured, becomes one of the most powerful forces in the spiritual life. The gift of divine discernment. And you'll come to see, this is not merely a sense. It is a calling. And we're about to explore it together. What makes me admire Sagittarius the most is not just their courage, or the fire in their words, but something deeper. Something very few people notice. It is their gift of discernment. Not the kind based on logic or analysis, but a kind of knowing that defies explanation. An inner sensitivity. As if they hear what others haven't yet said. They sense the energy in the room. They read the intention behind a smile. They feel when a soul is lost. Even when that person is still pretending to be fine. I believe this is one of the most sacred gifts Sagittarius has been given. The ability to discern between light and shadow. Between what is right and what is merely reasonable. Between the voice of the soul and the noise of the world. And the Bible is not unfamiliar with this gift. In the book of Hebrews, there's a powerful verse. But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. Discernment is not a natural-born talent. It is a form of spiritual maturity. And Sagittarius, with a heart that always questions, and a spirit that always seeks deeper meaning, is a soul well suited to grow in that way. I once witnessed a Sagittarian woman walk away from a high-ranking position, a job with a salary most people dream of, simply because something inside her whispered, "Staying would be a betrayal of my soul." No one understood her. Many called her crazy. But 2 years later, she began a new job, serving the community, making less money, but full of meaning. And she told me, "Now I wake up each morning without that heaviness. I'm still tired, but I'm living in truth with the voice inside me." That story stayed with me, because I realized, not everyone has the gift of discernment, and even fewer have the courage to act on it. The greatest lesson I've taken from this is simple. Knowing what's right is not enough. You must believe in it enough to follow it. And Sagittarius, when living from their highest truth, is someone who dares to do exactly that. They don't just feel. They act. And that's what sets them apart. In a world where most get swept up by the crowd, Sagittarius has the courage to stand apart, quietly waiting on heaven's signal. But with this gift also comes challenge. Because it's not always easy to tell what is divine intuition and what is fear in disguise. And that's where faith is needed. The Bible says, "The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord." And I believe when Sagittarius combines their heightened intuition with a life anchored in God, with prayer, with stillness, then that gift of discernment becomes clear. It becomes a lamp to their feet, a light not only for themselves, but for others walking in the dark. The real question is not, do I have the gift of discernment? But, do I have the courage to trust the light I see, even when no one else does? That is the question Sagittarius must ask. And perhaps, the question every soul must ask, when learning how to listen to the voice of their own spirit. I believe that today's world is thirsting for people who can see beyond the surface. We don't just need more speakers. We need depth. We need people with eyes that can see what hasn't yet happened. People who know what is right, even when no one else agrees. And if you're listening to this and your heart is stirring, write it down as a commitment. I choose to trust the divine intuition that God placed in my heart. That sentence is more than a declaration. It's a step toward the light. Because you're not just someone walking through this world. You are someone who was chosen to see what others haven't yet seen. And you weren't called to keep that to yourself. You were called to guide, to uplift, to warn, to inspire. There will be days you doubt yourself. There will be days you wish you weren't so sensitive, that you didn't see so much. But remember, the brighter the light, the longer the shadow. And those who carry the light are not meant to hide. They are meant to shine. This world needs you. Your family needs you. The next generation needs you. And so, the gift of discernment is not just for you. It is a sacred responsibility. A flame you've been entrusted to carry. Even when the winds blow hard. Even when no one thanks you for it. But deep in your heart, You know? You can't live any other way. Because you weren't created just to survive. You were created to lead. And that is only one of the many deep layers within Sagittarius. Because here lies a beautiful paradox that few ever recognize. The ones who seem the most carefree are often the ones who feel the most deeply. The ones who appear the most free are often the most sensitive, the loneliest, and the most tender-hearted. In the next part, we'll explore the side of Sagittarius that few ever notice. The quiet pain, the unspoken wounds, and the healing journey taken in silence by a soul born to bring light. Even while they are quietly breaking, there's something the world rarely admits. That those who smile the most, who seem the strongest, who talk about hope and ideals, are often the ones who've walked through the deepest wounds they've never named. I think of Sagittarius, the sign everyone assumes is cheerful, optimistic, too light-hearted to feel sad. But they don't know that behind those smiling eyes is a soul that bruises easily. A heart that's been broken. That's wrestled in silence. That's walked through dark nights alone, unseen. Sagittarius is not unfeeling. They're simply good at enduring. They've learned to hide their pain, to keep walking as if nothing happened. They still smile, still lift others up, still inspire. Because they tell themselves, I'm strong. But somewhere inside, there's an emptiness no one has noticed. A question still unanswered. Have I truly been seen? Am I loved for who I am? Or only for the light I give? I remember an old friend, a true Sagittarius. She was always the one who brought others peace. Whenever someone was hurting, she was there. But when she cried, no one noticed. She used to say, I don't want to burden anyone. I used to think that was humility. But later, I realized it was the voice of someone who had never been heard. Someone who had learned not to be a weight to others, even when she was collapsing inside. And that is a lesson I've never forgotten. That not everyone who is strong is okay. And not everyone who smiles is happy. Sagittarius is like that. They carry the strength to lift others, but are rarely lifted themselves. They heal many, but don't know how to ask for healing in return. In the Bible, there is an image that often makes me think of Sagittarius. The image of David. A warrior. A poet. A king. A man brave enough to face Goliath, yet tender enough to cry alone in a cave. The one who wrote the Psalms, but also the one who pleaded, O Lord, do not hide your face from me. And I believe that many Sagittarians, at some point in their lives, have silently whispered the same plea. Not with words, but with their whole heart. And it is in that place, the deepest, weakest, most hidden part of ourselves, where true healing begins. Not when you become stronger, but when you allow yourself to touch your weakness with honesty and compassion. Because light doesn't come to accuse. Light comes to embrace the broken parts no one sees. Like Jesus, who didn't just come to perform miracles, but to shed tears with those who were hurting. He didn't ask you to be strong. He only asked you to be real. If you are a Sagittarius, and you've ever forced yourself to smile through days when your heart was falling apart, give yourself permission to stop. Not to give up, but to touch the tender part of yourself that no one has ever held. Breathe deeply, and speak this out loud. I need to be held. To be loved. To be heard. Because you are worthy of that. Not because you've done enough, but because you already are enough. And if what I'm saying makes your heart ache just a little, as if someone finally touched the place you've been hiding, leave a comment. I give myself permission to be vulnerable so I can heal. That isn't a confession. It is the first step on the journey back to yourself. I believe that when Sagittarius dares to look into their own pain without turning away, their energy is no longer just a burning flame. It becomes a warm fire. A fire that gives comfort, that heals, that silently softens the hardened corners of another's soul. And that is when they begin stepping into the true depth of their destiny. Not just as the one who walks, not just as the one who speaks, but as the one who inspires. Through the very things that once wounded them, there is something I deeply believe. Those who have suffered the most deeply, if healed properly, can become the most powerful healers. And Sagittarius, with all the fractures and rebirths they've lived through, can absolutely become that steady source of light. You don't have to hide your sorrow just to keep playing the role of the strong one. You only need to remember this. There is one who still sees you, even when others don't. And he doesn't love you for what you can do. He loves you simply because you are you. The healing journey is not about returning to who you once were. It's about becoming a softer, truer version of yourself. And only in that state of gentleness can you fully hear the next calling. The voice of divine wisdom within you. The ability to see the larger picture. To connect the scattered moments into a living truth. Because in the next part, we will explore a rare quality of Sagittarius. Deep wisdom, far-reaching vision, and the ability to uncover truth from what seems meaningless. A gift not easily recognized, but once awakened, it will change the way they see the world, and the way the world sees them. The world often praises intelligence, but forgets wisdom. People admire sharp minds, logical analysis, precise calculation. But there is a kind of intelligence that can't be measured by numbers or achievements. It's called wisdom. A kind of knowing that doesn't come from books, but from life. Not from knowing everything, but from understanding what truly matters. And that, I believe, is the gift that God has placed inside Sagittarian souls. They don't just know many things. They don't stop at surface answers. They are constantly asking, why? What does this mean? What am I learning from what I'm going through? For them, knowledge has no value unless it touches the soul. Unless it leads people back to what is true. What is good? What is worth living for? I once asked an older Sagittarius, why do you always try to connect every experience into a bigger story? He looked at me and answered softly, because everything has meaning. Nothing is random. If I don't connect the dots, I might forget why I'm alive. That answer still lingers in my heart. And the longer I live, the more I realize he was right. Sagittarius is someone who sees the big picture. When others are caught in the details, they have the ability to lift their head and say, wait a minute. This story isn't over. Something bigger is unfolding here. They are the ones who quietly gather the scattered pieces of failure, pain, and unfinished hope, and piece them together into a sacred map. Not to romanticize the past, but to find meaning. To ensure that pain is not wasted. To know that if they are still alive, then something is still being written. The Bible teaches us the same thing. That all things work together for good for those who love God. Not that everything is good, but that everything, loss, mistakes, delays, can become part of his redemptive plan. And Sagittarius, with their open mind and heart that longs to understand life deeply, is perhaps the most naturally attuned to this message. I believe that living without meaning is one of humanity's deepest silent sorrows. But Sagittarius, in some mysterious way, can see the sacred even in the most ordinary moments. They might be standing in the middle of a crowded market on a stressful afternoon, and suddenly realize, this too is a miracle, a part of something greater than myself. And that single moment, even if no one else notices, is enough to keep their heart warm. If you are a Sagittarius and have ever been told, you think too much, you idealize everything, you're too much of a dreamer, maybe you weren't wrong. Maybe you are the one still holding on to something sacred for this world. In an age where everyone is busy, practical, and emotionally distant, you still dare to ask, does this make me a better person? Will this help someone feel more loved? That's not weakness. That is maturity. And if you're listening to this and feel your heart exhale, as if someone finally understands you, I invite you to write down this affirmation. I choose to live with meaning, not just with goals. Because you weren't born just to compete. You were born to see beyond the surface of life, to notice what others miss. I used to think that changing the world required power. Now I know. To change the world, we need people who protect kindness, who keep asking, why? In a world that's moving too fast to stop and think. And Sagittarius, with their emotional wisdom, is exactly the kind of person who can do that. I'm not saying they are always right, but I believe they are always learning. Always yearning to understand themselves, to understand others, to understand the one who created it all. And when you combine your wisdom with faith, when you let your intuition be guided by love, then everything you say, everything you see, will no longer be just information. It becomes light. Perhaps that's why Sagittarius is often born into families, into circumstances, into generations, where they are the first to ask questions, the first to break the mold, the first to choose a different path. It isn't easy, but it's because they dared to be different, that the next generation can live more truthfully, more freely, more whole. And that is the greatest reward of a soul born with divine wisdom. Not glory, but impact. Not standing on a stage, but planting seeds for the next generation. With the questions, the faith, the long vision they've carried throughout their journey. In the next part, we'll talk about a theme that is rarely mentioned. Yet it is the sacred root of Sagittarius' entire journey, faith. Not blind belief, but a living, breathing faith. The kind that helps them walk through uncertainty, leap before the bridge appears, and speak words of hope when there is no visible reason to believe. It is what allows them not just to survive, but to live with the spirit of a pioneer. There is a kind of strength that doesn't come from muscles, or status, or money. It comes from something fragile, but more enduring than all of those, faith. Not the faith you have when everything is going right, but the kind that stays alive even when everything falls apart. It's the kind of faith that keeps you walking, even when you can't see the road. The kind that helps you believe in light, even while you are still walking through the night. And to me, Sagittarius is a living embodiment of that kind of faith. You can call them dreamers, unrealistic, chasers of uncertainty. But the truth is, inside every Sagittarius is a sacred force that not everyone has the courage to carry. A belief in something better. In the future. In people. In themselves. And above all, in an unseen but familiar power. The one who quietly guides them through every season of challenge. I remember once, during a chaotic period in my life, I sat with a Sagittarian friend. Everything inside me was a mess. Doubt, exhaustion, loss of faith. But she looked at me, gently held my hand, and said, "It's okay. If you can't believe in yourself right now, just borrow my belief for a while. I'll believe for you." And strangely enough, I began to stand up again. Not because she had the solution, but because she had faith. A faith so real, so warm. It made me feel lifted. Even if just for a moment. I realized then, sometimes we don't need advice. We just need someone strong enough to keep us from being swept away. And Sagittarius, when they live in alignment with their spiritual essence, is that person. They don't hand you shortcuts. They give you the courage to walk the long way. In the Bible, there's one image I always associate with Sagittarius. Paul. A man who once opposed God, then was completely transformed and became one of the greatest missionaries in history. He traveled thousands of miles, crossed seas, endured prison and loneliness, all to share the faith he had encountered. Paul didn't live to be stable. He lived to spread fire. And I see Sagittarius in that. A soul who knows they were not born to stay put, but to go far. To go deep? To carry good news. The lesson I've taken from this is clear. Faith is not something you hold. Faith is something you live. And the more authentically you live, the farther you walk from comfort zones, the more necessary that faith becomes. It doesn't promise you won't face storms, but it promises you won't be crushed in them. If you are a Sagittarius hearing this, and you've ever been criticized for being naive, for blind belief, then ask yourself, if I don't believe, what am I even living for? Your faith isn't foolishness. It's a spiritual inheritance, carried by your soul. Just like Paul believed in prison, or like the quiet prayers whispered by mothers in the dark, when no one else sees. This is your invitation. To step out of your comfort zone. To step into the unknown. And to believe that something sacred is waiting for you on the other side. And if you've ever had to walk alone, believe when no one else would. Please know this. You are not alone. There is one walking beside you. An invisible hand that has lifted you more times than you can remember. And if you're still hearing this now, then your journey isn't over. Write this down as your affirmation. I choose to live by faith, not just by sight. Because sometimes, the eyes can't see what the heart has known all along. And if what I've said touches something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this message like a seed of faith sown in the world. Because maybe you're not just being reminded. Maybe you're becoming the reminder for someone else who's losing hope. I believe that if each of us lived with just a little faith each day, even just a spark, the world would feel lighter, warmer, more worth living in. And Sagittarius, you were born to keep that flame alive. Because in the end, you are not just the one who walks ahead. You are the one who walks through fear, through darkness, through the unknown, to become the torch that others follow. And now, we've traveled far in our exploration of Sagittarius. But there is one final truth, and perhaps the most beautiful one. Self-acceptance. In our final chapter, we'll look back on this journey. Not to say that Sagittarius needs to change, but to understand that they were born exactly as they were meant to show up in this world. And it is that full-hearted acceptance of every contradiction, every movement, every light and shadow, that unlocks the final, divine purpose written in their soul. It's time to pause for a moment. Not to turn back, but to look at the road you've walked. If you've come with me this far, it's probably not just because you were curious about Sagittarius, but because something within you, very personal, very deep, has been touched. And that is the beginning of all healing. When we start to see ourselves, not through the eyes of the world, but through the gaze of the one who created us. Sagittarius is often misunderstood for their inner contradictions. Free yet profound. Rational yet dreamy. Passionate yet sometimes detached. But the Bible never asks humans to be perfect by worldly standards. On the contrary, Scripture records the journeys of imperfect souls. Souls that God used fully and beautifully. That's why the most sacred thing a Sagittarius can do is not to go further, climb higher, or know more. It is to learn how to accept themselves right where they are. Because when you stop trying to become someone else and begin to believe, I am already enough, that's when your soul becomes lighter and steadier than ever before. You don't have to tear yourself in half to please the world. You don't have to choose between idealism and reality, between logic and heart. You are the beautiful intersection God designed on purpose. Because true light doesn't come only from the perfect parts. It comes from wholeness. And that is the final gift God gives to those who dare to be real. Wholeness. If you feel this speaks to the journey you're living, leave a comment. I accept my whole self. And I believe it's part of God's plan. Write it down like a sacred step forward. Because sometimes, simply saying it out loud is enough to open a door. And if this message has touched your heart, please share it. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. And who knows? What you share today might become the light someone else is searching for in the dark. We weren't born to live the same. We were born to live truthfully. Like a star burning in its own way. In the exact sky it was sent into. And when a Sagittarius walks in their truth, the earth becomes brighter. And heaven feels closer. And when all your scattered pieces are finally embraced, you'll realize you were never lost. You were called. Called to go far. Not because you had no place to belong, but because your heart is where the light resides. Called to speak truth. Not because you're always right, but because you carry a message the world needs to hear. Called to see deeper, wider. Not for pride, but to guide. And called to live. With all your contradictions, desires, wounds. As a living witness that light and shadow can coexist. Within a soul God is transforming, day by day. You don't need to rush to become whole. Because the moment you live authentically, the moment you allow yourself to spread your wings, without fear of being seen, you have fulfilled your role as a Sagittarius. The keeper of light in dark places. The one who rekindles faith in souls that thought they had given up. And if you're still here, still listening, it is not by chance. Maybe God is whispering to you. I have called you by name. I see you. I know you. And I choose you. Even when you haven't yet chosen yourself. Hold that truth close. And if you are ready to say yes to that calling, Write down this affirmation. I choose to trust the path God has uniquely designed for me. The words you write today may be your very first answer to a sacred invitation that has long been waiting for your reply. Thank you for listening with your whole heart. If this journey gave you something, a spark, an answer, or simply the feeling of being understood, share it. Because somewhere out there, another Sagittarius may be searching for what you just found. We don't need to know everything. We just need to live truthfully with what has already been planted in our hearts. And when you do that, when you live in the spirit of Sagittarius, the world will never be the same again. It will have one more star, burning exactly where it was born to burn. I'll see you in the light.